thinks Rosen's the second best quarterback. So a lot of indecision at number 1, Rosen number 2, and then it kind of falls into order after that. So I think Josh Rosen is the only one that's going to be a surefire top 5 pick. And then I don't know who's going to get selected number 1. And the other guys could slide depending on what happens with the trades and how the Kirk Cousins kind of saga ends between Denver and New York at 5 and 6.
And who would you take?
I would take Sam Darnold. Okay. And this is why. When you look at what Sam Darnold was charged with doing after USC lost to Alabama 2 years ago, they weren't even in the same hemisphere as far as competitiveness on the college football field. And he changed the landscape of the sport for 2 straight years because of what he did making people around him better. That's what I think NFL quarterbacks are charged with doing, is make your team better. When it falls onto your shoulders, can you go win the football game? And he proved time after time after time the last 2 years that when it falls on your shoulders, he could go win you a game. I'm thinking of Stanford this year. I'm thinking of Texas this year. Didn't have a lot of help around him. Had some very inexperienced and smaller wide receivers, and he still went out there and played at a very high level.
So, for about half of this football season, I agreed with you. And then Sam Darnold began to turn the football over. And he became, as Shannon pointed out earlier in this show, a turnover machine this year at USC. And I get it that he's trying too hard. He's trying to lift up some mediocre talent in some positions to a higher level. But I look at 13 interceptions and 8 fumbles lost, which led Division I, led the whole country. That's no good. That's 21 turnovers from one quarterback. And as we saw with Jameis, that history followed him right into the National Football League. Now, Deshaun Watson turned it over a lot his last year at Clemson, but he had come off the championship game the year before, and I kept telling Shannon all year long, so I'm not being 20/20 hindsight, I said, I think he's just trying to get back to Alabama. Like he doesn't care enough. He's not focused on the week-to-week in the ACC kind of games. He just wants to get to Bama. When he got to him, he got him, right? So I told you last year, sitting right here in this seat, probably about this day, Deshaun Watson is by far the best player in this last year's draft. And if Cleveland does not take him, they will make a monumental mistake, and I believe they did just that. I don't see one of these top 4. We could throw Lamar Jackson in there if we want. Let's say 5 quarterbacks. I don't see one who is anywhere near what I thought Deshaun was a year ago, because they all have their flaws and, in one case, red flags. But to me, if you gun to head made me take a quarterback with the first overall pick, I'm taking Baker Mayfield. Just because Charlie Weiss sat in your chair after the national semifinal and he just pointed up to that guy on the screen and said, I want him. Because I can't teach or coach what's inside him. Nobody's more competitive. Just whatever winners intangibles he has, leadership intangibles, inspirational intangibles, I'm talking about on the football field, he's got it. It just spills out of him. That's what drove him to be a walk-on at Texas Tech and then a walk-on at the University of Oklahoma. He is the most accurate of these throwers. He is, to me, the least likely to make a mistake because he's high risk, low mistakes, which is, it's hard to do in that offense, as you well know. But he only had 6 interceptions last year. He does not turn the football over, and he takes lots of risks. He's got a live whip of an arm, and he is elusive in the. I know he ran 4.8. That was about right.
Don't care.
But he is elusive in the pocket. He's got quick feet and he's tough. He's mentally tough. He's a gamer, and yet he measured 6 foot and 5/8 of an inch. So he's 2 inches taller than Russell Wilson. Does that do anything for you? Maybe a little bit. He's a half inch taller than Drew Brees. And he's a full inch taller than Johnny Manziel. So he's at the upper end of short, right?
I think most people would be surprised just standing next to him, how thick and how tall he is, because he gets this rap of being a small quarterback. Definitely not a small quarterback.
He kind of plays small in his pads. He looks small to me compared to his offensive line or whatever.
But would you give me this? If Baker did not have the red flags, the incidents off the field, the immaturity issues, he would be compared more favorably to a Drew Brees.
No doubt.
Wilson.
No doubt. I think that would be the comparison. You wouldn't hear anything about Johnny Manziel because it's really not a comparison. Manziel was not a great thrower of the football. He was not a very good quarterback. He
was decent.
He was okay at best. He was best outside of the structure of his own offense. Mayfield is best inside of the structure of his own offense.
I agree with that.
Nobody owned the middle of the field in college football like Baker did, and that's really where you own the NFL is between the numbers. And in this era of RPO style systems, in particular with what Philadelphia did, not only in the NFC Championship, but in the Super Bowl, and what Nick Foles was allowed to do through their game plan. If those RPOs are going to continue to happen in the National Football League, there's been no quarterback in college football that I've seen in the last 5 years that is a better RPO thrower than Baker Mayfield.
When I look at it, I'm with you, Skip, and I've said this, I don't really love any of these guys, but if you like Josh Allen going into the combine, he's your guy.
Sure.
Because
he is a cannon.
He's prototypical. He's 6'5", 237 with a 10-inch hand. And people are like, why do you care about big hands? Because inclement weather. Inclement weather.
Yeah.
You want someone that can grip the ball in the rain, in the snow, when it's wind. You want someone to be able to spin it because it looks like Cleveland. We know what the weather. You play in Baltimore, you play in Cincinnati, you play in Pittsburgh. So you need someone if you're going to go to the Cleveland Browns. If you play if you go to the Giants, what is inclement weather? Everybody's outside with the exception of Dallas. You got Philly, you got Washington, you got the New York, 8 games a season. So all that plays into it. And his former coach was the coach with Carson Wentz. So you're like, oh, yeah, he knows. He better the pro-style offense. So, Skip, he has a lot of things working in his favor. But for me, look at the tape. I'm a believer. I don't know how you look at this, Joel. I look at the combine should offer confirmation of what you've seen on tape. If the guy looks fast, he ran fast. A guy looks explosive, he jumps high. A guy looks quick, his 10-yard short shuttle. Okay, I'm not going to say that's the end-all, be-all, but let him validate what I see, what I think I saw on tape. And then if it doesn't happen like that, I need to go back and watch tape some more.
No doubt.
And I got to watch him a little more carefully as pro day.
I would take that a step further. Not only confirmation of what you see on tape, but confirmation of what you hear in terms of the rumors. Because remember, this is really about the medical evaluations and the meetings. You know, those 15-minute meetings that they have. And so in particular for a guy, and I'll bring up both of these guys, for Baker Mayfield and Josh Rosen, throwing and running, that's great. I mean, we all know they can throw and they can run, and they're very accurate, and they're probably the 2 best throwers of the football in this draft. But for them, the most important part was sitting with those NFL GMs because of the perception of their attitude or these red flags.
Right.
And what they presented in those personal meetings, I think, was much more important than maybe even the tape that they put out there from this fall.
I know, but Baker Mayfield can talk a great game with adults. He's like we do the Eddie Haskell. It's way before most people's time, but leave it to Beavis.
Yeah.
Okay. So when it's with the adults, he turns on his charm and he can come across as 23 going on 33. But he gets into the nightlife and the after hours and he's a different guy. And so my issue with Baker is he playing, does he love football just because he loves to win football games, or does he love what it does for him at the club after hours? Because it does a lot for him, and he does love the nightlife, maybe to a fault. I'm not saying he's going to turn into Johnny. Johnny went completely over the edge in Cleveland. He hasn't gone completely over the edge, but the red flag is there, and it would be troubling to me.
I will tell you that I talk with a lot of his teammates, almost all of his teammates, of consequence from Oklahoma, and they will say to a man, not just that they love him. And listen, we get it, right? You're the best player in the country. Your teammates are going to love you.
Correct.
You play with the moxie and the fire that Mayfield does. Your teammates are going to love you. But to a man, they all say he's one of the hardest working guys on our team. You could not get an A&M player to say that when Johnny Manziel came
That's
out.
a fact.
That's a fact.
I was close to that. That's true.
And Mayfield is a guy that will spend the time. He does love the grind. Lincoln Riley will tell you that, but more importantly, all of his teammates will tell you he's generally one of the first guys in, last to leave when it comes to workouts. He's going to work hard when it comes to watching film, preparing for the game. That tells me that maybe he doesn't love the game, but he loves to compete with his teammates. And I do think that he is more than the club or the afterlife. He to me screams a guy that made some really poor decisions. Can he curb those? Hopefully. But he's a guy that I think can transform an NFL locker room.
Well, I think the thing is, this is what we know about the NFL and money. Money doesn't change you. It makes you more of what you already are. If you got a weight problem and you eating training table and you got no money in college, what's going to happen when you get 10, 15, 20 million dollars and you can go get what you want? If you have a drinking problem, you're not drinking no cheap liquor. You're getting the good stuff and you're getting it frequently. So that's what money does. Money exacerbates whatever problems you have. It will exacerbate it. So if you were a jerk and you had no money, you are gaping when you get some money.
Sure.
So we're about to find out. Now, Baker Mayfield, I'm sorry. The comparisons are there because you got basically